Flick back. This is pushed back.
This is pushed back.
All right. Know what it is. You know who it is. We are back with another episode of the BG Perform podcast. As you can see, Jerry lives in LA. I live in New York. It's getting a little cold over here.
It's getting chillier over here. In the mornings, it's like 50-ish.
Okay.
It's cold on the motorcycle. I'll say that, bro.
Okay,
I'm
whatever
bundled
you
up in the
say.
morning.
We
No, it's
are
still nice over here.
back with another episode. This week, we have a cool topic, something that I think is going to be really fun to talk about from like a coaching perspective. Has to do a little bit more with the S&C. But before we get into that, Jerry, how was the week? How's everything going? Anything on your end you want to discuss?
The week has been good. It's been great-ish. It's been great. I'd say great. You know, we're getting a lot of stuff done that I've been traveling a lot for bachelor parties, weddings, and my girl, she's out of state, so I've been like obviously traveling a lot for that too, but I've got back into a little bit more of a routine, so our lifts are becoming more regular. Meal prep is becoming more regular again, and my sleep because of that is also becoming more regular. So I'm feeling really good. I've been super busy at work, so time is occupied in a good way. We're growing, and it's showing. And besides that, you know, not much going on. What about you?
Just working, getting things done, training people, training myself. Got this half marathon in a couple weeks. I'm going away this weekend. I'm excited about the Toronto card show. I'm going to go to Jerry's house this weekend and go stay there.
My home
Not really
house,
Jerry's
not
house,
this
home
house.
but,
The house I grew up in.
What?
I said the house I grew up in.
Yes. And go hang out with my other cousin, Mikey. So it's going to be a nice
Little
weekend
Mikey.
getaway. Fun. Go do what I love. And yeah, I got
an update on that shoulder?
it's getting there. I mean, it's just got to finish this half marathon.
Okay.
Hopefully hit a PR. I basically hit a PR the other day. I ran about 12 and a half miles because it was like 20K because I've been using kilometers for the running, but it was like 12 and a half miles. Did that in an hour and 39 minutes or 40 minutes. So that was a PR in general because basically
That's
another
pretty
half
good.
mile would have taken me 2 more minutes. So I did the half marathon in April in an hour and 49 minutes. So definitely sped up there. So I'm excited.
Mhm.
And that was like first 10K was a little bit slower. Next 10K was a little bit faster. So or was that the
Is that the
actual
run you
race
did where
pace?
it was the 8-minute mile pace?
Yeah, it was like 8:05
Yeah, I
minute
saw
mile.
that.
So
Yeah,
I'm hoping
that's
to
really
get
good.
under 8 for the actual race. We'll see how I hold up for the all 13 miles, but we're going to push it. We're going to fucking send it. We're going to get this PR, and then it's going to be winter, so might do a little more jiu-jitsu, a little bit more lifting, get back into the lifting because I've been pretty tired from the running. Not that I'm going to stop, but might just be a little less volume on the legs. So
Yeah. Nice, dude. That's exciting.
yeah.
I like it.
So today,
One might say you're headed toward the off season.
yes, one might say I'm headed towards the off season. Today we're going to be diving into off-season programming versus in-season programming, or off-camp versus in-camp in my training sphere of the fight world. So I want to talk about this because I do think this is important. I think it's really important to kind of dive into the differences between off-camp and in-camp. And I think as strength conditioning coaches, you know, we have to balance this throughout the year because I've personally seen too many athletes who are training like in camp year round because they don't know what else to do, or they only have like one switch, and it's like, all right, when I train it's 110% and that's it, right? So how I want to kind of go about this, I want to talk about it a little bit. I want to talk about the differences. I want to talk about what they should both look like. I want to talk about it from my perspective of like training fighters mostly versus other types of athletes, and Jerry's perspective as well, and then kind of, you know, take you through that process from there. So to start, is there anything you want to add to start, Jerry? Let you go first.
No, I'm excited to jump into this one.
All right. So
Yeah.
I think to start, right, we have to start by actually like defining what in camp and off camp programming is. So in my mind, or in season and off season, right? I'm gonna say that. I just say in camp because like it's just more of my
Fight.
vocabulary, but we'll say in camp / season versus off camp / season, right? Off camp or off season programming is programming when we're not at the peak of our sport, or we're not, in a phase of getting ready to compete in our sport, right? This would be a time when, the season ends, preseason type deal, which isn't even really off season or off camp programming, but, uh, again, just programming that's not in the space, I guess, of having to compete in the sport, or not built with any, like, I guess we'll put it that way, like with no specific outcome needed or necessary. Would you agree that's a good way to put it?
Yeah, there's a little more leeway there.
Yeah. And then in-camp programming or in-season programming would be one of like, hey, we're getting ready for an event, we're getting ready for a specific thing or competition, and we want to perform at a certain level and get a specific outcome to that training.
In a specific time period. There's a
Yes.
timeline. Yeah.
In a specific time period. And especially with, fighting, fighting is one of those things where we only have 6 to 8 weeks, right? We only have a certain amount of time to get ready for something. And the, in-season programming is a little bit different because it's drawn out a little bit more, right? Like when we look at all the types of sports out there, we have fighting, which is like a very individual sport, versus like a team sport like basketball, baseball, soccer, hockey, whatever it might be. The seasons are very long for team sports, and the off seasons are relatively short, but the seasons are very long. Like baseball is 162 games. It goes from basically, we can say April to September, right? Yeah, basically April to October.
If you get to the series.
Yeah, but April to October, right? So that's April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So basically 8 months of playing, right? And then football is the same thing. So football is like, September to February if you make it that far. Basketball is usually October to like May-ish, June, that sort of deal. So like these are very much long drawn out seasons. So the in-season programming for that looks a little bit different than like a fight camp, because a fight camp's only 6 to 8 weeks. You're getting ready for a specific event, you're having that fight, and then you're having like a little bit of a layoff, hopefully, where you can rest, or you're kind of getting right back into it and going into the fold again. So to kind of start, right? Do you want to dive into off camp first, or you want to dive into in camp?
I think in camp has more specific things that you need to do, so we can kind of hit like the vague off camp, off season, and then jump more into the specifics of in.
Cool. So, is there anything you want to add to that kind of breakdown, or no?
I think it's best we just jump into it, because then I can just add to what we're saying versus.
Cool. So
overlap.
Getting into the main deal, right? So for me, when I look at off camp training, or if I look at off season training, this, like, my main goal when I always talk to people about this time and training is health, right? Especially when we're talking about athletes. It's essentially preparing our body to take on heavy loads of training that are going to come up, right? Whether it's the fight camp where it's like, hey, we have 8 weeks of really, really, really hard work, or it's, hey, we got a really long season coming up. So the goal here is to be healthy. The goal here, like, in this phase, you really shouldn't be able to tell, what type of sport the athlete is playing. And I think that's a really good kind of like metric to follow, or I don't even know if it's a metric or like a visual thing to follow, because again, we talked about this last time, but we'll talk about it a little bit again today, but when you try to make the training in the gym look like the sport, that's when you're going to really start to kind of miss out on the purpose of training, right? Like when we're in an off season or off camp program, it should look very, very general. It should cover a lot of different aspects, movements, stimuli, like whatever it might be. Like we should literally be building something that covers, like, from head to toe, everything that the athlete could possibly need or touch on those aspects, right? Like, and we talked about this a little bit last time, like the job of an S&C coach is to fill buckets, right? Mm-hmm. And the off camp especially, we need to be filling those buckets to the brim a little bit, like getting to the edge of the things that they're not going to see in the season, right? So they might not have a lot of time. They might not have a lot of energy. They might not have the opportunities because of the travel, or the again, the long seasons and all of these things that go into like these team sports, and then with the fighting, it's a really hard time during those last, say, 6 weeks of camp when you're cutting calories, you're essentially fighting and you're training every single day. You're getting ready to step into an octagon. You have to cut weight, then you have to rehydrate, then you have to step out there with all that adrenaline, and then you have to fight, right? And a lot of this that comes of it can be made better if you had a better off-camp / off-season program, right? It should be regenerative. It should be progressive. Like, it should allow you to build up your weaknesses inside the camp to some degree and create a new baseline or floor that we can then build off of, which obviously helps us have a higher ceiling in camp or in season, right? And I think that's a very obviously like general definition, but from that perspective, when we look at like off-camp programming, it's very much built around the basic lifts. It's very much built around the basic sets and reps, getting stronger, building the total capacity. Touching on things, like I said, it might be mobility drills that we're normally not seeing. It might be movements that, for the most part, we're not going to use in season, but it might be good to learn just to touch on different aspects. Like, it might be some type of active mobility. It might be some unique patterns that you're like, hey, I'd really like to work on this in this setting just to improve overall function. And it's okay. I don't want to say it's okay to waste time in the off camp, but it's okay to kind of take your time and try new things or put people in positions that they're not used to being in, because they're going to get a lot out of that, right? And my main thing with the off camp training, if I can summarize it in like the last sentence, is get them ready to do work, right? Build resilience, build that, integrity, build that structural strength, build all of the things that you're going to need. So when the actual training or the actual, competition comes into play, their body doesn't fall apart, right? Because I think too many people skip this phase, and then you wonder why these athletes fall apart, or they continue to get injured, or, they don't perform at their best, right? And I think there's also something to be said that like a lot of these guys didn't have this back in the day, and they still were, very high level competitors. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something to be said about the, just the ability for some of these guys to build resilience when weightlifting really wasn't what it is now, and it was very basic. And a lot of these guys did a lot of general stuff back then, right? Like, they weren't doing some of the crazy stuff we see now, or some of the very hyper specific stuff for training that we see now. And when you went back and you looked at Jordan, when you looked at Kobe, they were benching, they were squatting, they were, to a certain extent, they were squatting, to a certain extent, they were deadlifting, but like, they were doing basic lifts that got them stronger and helped them on the court. And in the off season, it was very like, there was a couple big times when Jordan came back and, was like, hey, I need to get stronger if I'm going to beat the Pistons. And he literally went to the weight room and did, they showed the training. It was very basic. It's almost like built-in bodybuilding fundamentals, and kind of progressed in that way. And he got better, he got stronger, and he went through, right? But yeah, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think obviously the off season starts when the in season ends.
Off season starts at Dick's.
Are we sponsored now? This is great. Buy your dicks today. Sorry.
Dick's Sporting Goods, that is. I don't know.
Yes, Dick's Sporting Goods. Obviously.
It's every season.
Ladies and gentlemen. No, I'm kidding.
It's every season starts at Dick's, not off season.
Off season.
I messed that one up. Sorry.
That's all right. Hey, off seasons is a season. So
it is.
Obviously it starts when your in season ends, and that's like, duh, idiot, of course. But everybody's in season ends differently, especially depending on the level that they're playing at. So I would honestly encourage a lot of the athletes that I were working with who were at a higher level, like D1 college kids, and even we would recommend a lot of the pros that we were working with when I was in New York, that after the season's over, just to take a full week of nothing. And I usually don't recommend people stop moving, but like after a full season, a lot of games, high output, high intensity, your body's pretty fried, and you're kind of moving into that like adrenaline to get you through things. I always recommend that they take a full week, do absolutely nothing. I'm like, dude, if you want to go to the movies, you want to play video games all day, do that. Just do whatever is relaxing to you. Then we begin our off season, because the off season is where the intensity bumps up quite a bit because we're able to build that base. So obviously, like Brandon said, it's a time to build resilience. It's a time to make sure that we're functioning well, and any little injuries or things that were nagging throughout the season, we fix those, we get on top of it, and we build a stronger, healthier athlete. But once we've built that stronger, healthier athlete, they're feeling really good. That's your time, like Brandon said, to get stronger, to put on mass depending on your sport. You're a football player, you're a hockey player. A lot of our guys who wanted to put on a little bit of mass to be more enforcer-like. Just putting on lean muscle mass in general in the off season is going to require a lot of intensity. It's not that maintenance stuff that we're talking about where we're filling buckets. So the amount of output that is required, you still need to have the same intentions. Eat really well, sleep really well, do everything that you need to do with your athletes, but you're also asking for a little bit more in the weight room than you would typically in the in-season. So on top of that full week of rest, as soon as they get back, you kind of do a reevaluation. Like, how are we feeling now that we've had that week? Well, how has this injury been? What was your main struggle this past season? And you kind of create a little checklist of all the things that could have been better, so you can make a checklist of things to work on through the off season. And starting with that is going to be a really good way to build a base for you and your programming. And like Brandon said too, you can get a little more creative, movements that you haven't done, movements that are a little more tricky, movements that may be a little more demanding of the central nervous system because they're not in their sport. So taking advantage of the extra time, energy, and intensity that you could throw into a program is huge for the off season.
Yeah, I'm kind of laughing at myself because I remember there was I have a funny story about Ian. Ian had just fought Keenan Song, and this was at I think it was UFC. I don't remember the UFC this was, but he had just fought Keenan Song, and like within 2 weeks, he had taken another fight to fight D-Rod, and he had about maybe a week or two camp or like layoff until like we were starting the next camp, and he sleeps like crazy, or he slept like crazy when I was with them. And there was one day that his wife had a job, and she had to go because we were in England, and she had to go back to Florida for a job. And me and him like hung out the day before. It was like we were just in England. We went out. We went we played we found this bowling thing. We went to play. We whatever. We did a couple things. And that night we probably went to bed around 10:30, 11. We were staying in the same apartment, but we were obviously in different rooms. And I woke up at 8 or 7, 8 o'clock, and I went and worked out. I came back. He still hadn't woken up. I made breakfast. I was chilling. It was 11 o'clock. I was like, damn, it's kind of late. He's still asleep, whatever. It's 12 o'clock comes around. I'm like, is he fucking all right? I look in the room, and it's pitch
dead?
black. He's just in the bed. And I was I called his wife, and I was like, have you talked to Ian? I was like, because it's 12 o'clock, and he hasn't moved. And I checked in there twice. And she was like, yeah, he's probably just sleeping. I was like, all right.
Check on him like a bababy, make sure he's breathing.
Literally 1 o'clock, this dude wakes up. And I'm like, dude, I thought you were dead. And he was he's like, what time is it? I was like, 1 o'clock. He's like, oh, fuck. And he was just it was just funny because he sleep after those fights. It just, that's how demanding it is. That's how demanding it is for an athlete to step into that environment, have to come out of it, and they need that time to recover. Maybe if 13 hours of sleeping is a little bit
I was saying
much.
that's 14 hours. Dude.
Yeah. But it might have been around 12, 1 o'clock. But anyways, that's a lot of time to sleep, and seeing it in real time and seeing how you have to recover is, especially from a fighting perspective, right? You're essentially doing, the hardest thing you have to do in regards to adrenaline, in regards to output. Those are the hardest sports, the fight sports, because there is no relaxing time.
It's a
right?
puzzle too. You're figuring out the opponent, so you're mentally exhausted.
Yeah, mentally, physically, all of it. You're exhausted,
Yeah.
and then at the end of it, you have to punch someone in the face and get punched in the face. So that's why I find that to be the most demanding and draining. But yeah, that was just a funny story of off season. That when you're in off season, that's what you get from athletes a lot of the time. But yeah, so then getting into in camp, right? So really the in-camp aspect of this is like, for me, this is a time for us to enhance the skills and improve the things we're already good at, or that are going to translate over to success in what it is that we're trying to do, whether it be in the fight, whether it be in like a race for what I'm doing now, like the half marathon, or it be for a competition or whatever your team sport is. Because in fighting, this usually happens around 6 to 8 weeks, that end up being a really long 6 to 8 weeks. And this happens multiple times within the year. So like we're trying to kind of get someone from this low of like recovery into peaking to perform at their best. And it's very high and low throughout the year. And you kind of have to, you want to keep them low while keeping them ready to also get into that next phase, because in camps can be, very challenging. Like you're demanding a lot of the individual, especially in a very short time. And even for like the team sports, right? In team sports, it can be from anywhere, like we said, like 5 to 8 months, depending on your season. So it's like you have to maintain those, we'll call it those gains, right? You have to maintain those gains for almost 5 to 8 months throughout the season, building that muscle mass, maintaining that joint structure integrity, like maintaining the health. Mind you, you're traveling, basketball specifically, like you're traveling in these planes for 4 or 5 hours at a time if you have to travel, and you're talking about athletes who are not small people for the most part, right? Unless you're the Saints kicker, that groper guy or groupie guy.
He's groping people.
No, he
The
looks like
grabber
a
from
girl.
Black Phone.
But like these guys are not small people, and then they're getting shoved into these planes, and then they're having to get up and compete, and the recovery's not there. You're probably not sleeping as well. You're traveling from city to city, changing time zones how many times a week. Like it's very demanding on the athlete. And I remember even another story from us. When I was with Ian, we there was a 2 week span where we went from England to Thailand, back to England, and then to Vegas. So we went from,
I remember that. It was like
yeah. So it was like fast. New York time, right? East Coast time is right now. It's like 6:30. It's 6:38, right? So England is 6 hours ahead of us right now, and then Thailand is 12 hours ahead of us, right? So we went 6 hours ahead, then 12 hours ahead of Eastern time, then 6 hours ahead, then 3 hours behind in the span of like 14 days. So it was like I've never felt that shitty in my life. Like, and I wasn't even training hard. Like,
did you get sick after that? Am I remembering that correctly?
I might have. I don't remember, but I remember
was that when Ian got pneumonia?
No. That was a while back. That was
a different time. Okay.
Yeah. But this I remember I got to Thailand and I tried to run, and I ran 3 miles, and I literally had to stop twice while I was running 3 miles. Like, had to stop, walk, could not continue because I felt so shitty. And I had never felt that way, right? And then it was like that's where it kind of hit me. It was like, wow, we're traveling. I mean, this is excessive travel. That's not like normal travel. But for an athlete to kind of go through that process and have to then compete or train on the other end of that, like that's a lot. And even like that was a little bit more severe of a travel for myself. Imagine like in the United States, where it's like you're going to LA and then you're going to New York and then you're going to, South Florida, or you're going to the middle of the country. It's like these time zones and travels. It's all changing at like such a rapid rate that your body still has to adjust to it. And while it might not be as big, it's still a change, right? You have to do that all in season while not recovering as well, playing as hard as you can, and then keeping up with the fitness you built up in the off season, right? So what tends to happen is a lot of these times is like you have to be very specific about what you're doing in season, in camp, and you have to make sure it's very efficient, it's very effective, and it's to the point, and it's not taking too much away, right? Mm-hmm. Like in-camp programming can be the most challenging, and in my opinion, it's the most challenging for fighters because, with the team sports, you're balancing one sport, right? With MMA, you're balancing like 4 or 5 different sports. You have MMA, you have boxing, you have kickboxing, you have wrestling, you have jiu-jitsu, and then you have, I guess that's really it. But like that's 5 different sports. You have to essentially like individual sports you're training throughout the week, and then you have to plan around that to then spar essentially. And then like the other sports, you can't just like practice sparring. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I can go shoot 50 free throws and be like, cool, I trained for an hour today. It's like if I'm going to spar, I'm literally fighting somebody. And it's like I'm doing what I do in the sport on the field, like that sort of thing. It's just very demanding. What?
I'm just thinking about something else for in season. You can finish your thought and then I'll add
But
to
yeah,
it.
so like I just think like in season for fighting is easily the hardest to kind of maintain, but like also with these other sports, it's very hard when you have these long seasons because you can't get those really regenerative type of sessions in because a lot of times you're lifting at off times or you're lifting after the game or a little bit before the game or you're kind of fitting it in on the days that you have time, but it's like the length of the season and all of that makes it really hard to kind of build a really efficient in-camp program. And that's why it's so important for the off season to be done in the right way so that when you get to that in-camp you're basically maintaining these levels of strength and then the off-camp is raising it and then you're maintaining that and then maintaining that over the course of like a career or a season.
Yeah, the in season can be tricky for a couple of reasons too. But like, I just thought of this one. Like, you have to be so specific about what you're doing in the in season based on like soreness levels too, because any slight change in stimulus can be, even if it's like a simple thing, can be so drastic in how the athlete feels. I remember that I was working with a couple of the high school teams in New York that I was contracted at. And when I was at the high school, I had, oh, motherfucker, that hurt. If you're listening, I just punched something metal on my mic and it scratched me. But I was working with some of the teams that weren't as familiar with weight training as like football and lacrosse and hockey. So it was one of the other sports. I think it was cross country or track, one of the two. And I had the kids in there, and we're going on week 5 of the same program, slightly different reps. And I remember one of the kids was like, "Do we have to do the same thing?" And I was like, "Well, I don't want to change it up. You guys got to meet tomorrow, and I want to make sure that we're being smart with our training." And the coach was like, "Well, do you think we could like do something easy, like something that wouldn't make them too sore?" I was like, "If I change the program at all, they're going to be very sore right now. I can tell you that because they just came from practice, and if I change it even a little bit, like they're probably going to be sore." I gave them basically like some isometric stuff, like stuff that wouldn't really bother them, to swap it out just so they could do something else. And the coach came in the next day and he goes, "Coach, I don't know what you did to these kids, but they are dead." And I was like, "Yeah, dude, I told you I didn't want to switch anything." He goes, "Well, they need it." And I was like, "They don't need that before a game. Are you kidding me?" I was like, "You couldn't wait until next week to switch it even a little bit?" He was like, "Nah, it's good for them. They need to know what it's like to work hard." And I was like, "Yeah, they do, but maybe not get them sore for the meet." But it's just funny. The whole sport coach dilemma as a strength coach is always fun. Like talking
That's why
to
you
the
gotta
sport
stick
coaches.
to your guns.
Yeah, man. Because I mean, I was one of those coaches who always had the brightest ideas, and I was like, "All right, I'm just gonna let this one slide a little bit. We'll see what happens." And I was right. Fun fact. So
Well, you gotta stick up for it next time.
who knew? Yeah, I did. I was like, so next time maybe we keep it the same.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, and I think that really like the whole point of this episode today is to kind of like define those two, really have this conversation of like what they look like, because I think the biggest mistake I kind of see inside of this is that you get athletes who are training like they have an event year round, and that's just not the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like obviously, if you're playing a team sport, for the most part, you probably, at least a high level professional team sport, like you're going to have a strength coach, you're going to have someone who's kind of guiding you, you're going to have someone who's putting together that plan. But if you're not, right, or if you're trying to get to that level, like having an off season is so important. I cannot stress that enough, how important it is, because you gain so much from having the off season, and it essentially helps you get more out of your in season, right? And maybe next time we can kind of dive a little bit more into like specifics of programming. But like I think today I kind of want to just cover the bases of like off-season programming should really just be defined by like general overviews, basic patterns, doing things that make you feel good, make you feel healthy, really like help you enjoy training. And then in season should be like, hey, here's our goal, here's our outcome, this is what we need to do. Now let's get better at it. Right? Mm-hmm. To make it like even simple, just in regards to running, because this is something I've been working on myself, was trying to get better at running, because it's just not something that's easy for me. I'm a bigger person, I'm at like 205 right now, and that's not like, that's not heavy, but that's not super light, especially for the amount of miles that I'm
For
running in a week.
distance, it's not standard
Yeah.
for
So,
a runner that
even
you
with the
find.
amount of time I'm running, like it's taken me a lot to get to the point where I could run an 8-minute mile for 13 miles, right? Like that takes a lot of time. And for me to get to that point, I had a lot of time where I was just running, where I wasn't really focusing on anything specific. There was no specific outcome. It was just like, hey, I'm going to try to run as fast as I can. If I have to slow down, I have to slow down. I was planning a little bit more of like the intervals maybe where I was like, hey, I just want to try to finish this as much as I can with some consistency. But now in this last 6 weeks, I got really specific. I figured out my this thing called critical speed. I figured out my critical speed. I figured out my threshold pace. I figured out my race pace, and my training has been improved because of that. Right. So like just even to give you an example, I'll pull one up, like an example workout of like a progression I've had over the last couple weeks. I put one on Instagram the other day as well. That was like my actual race day progression. But like looking at, for example, my first day of running during the week, right? So the day one, which is essentially like Tuesday, is my day one. Week one was a 8K at a moderate intensity, which was around basically like a 5:30 kilometer pace, which I think is like eight. I want to say 8:40 mile time. And then my race pace is around 4:50, which is like 7:50, 8 mile time, somewhere around there. So the workout was 8K at a moderate intensity, which was at that 5:30 pace, rest for 1 to 2 minutes, and then 10 sets of 200-meter run at 4:50 or below, with 1 minute walk in between, right? Then week two was the same thing, 8K at the moderate intensity with 6 sets of 300 at a fast pace with a 2-minute walk. Week three, 8K at moderate intensity with 5 sets of 400 meter run at a fast pace. 8K, week four, 8K, 4 sets of 500, 8K, 3 to 5 sets of 600, and then the last one next week will be 8K into 3 sets of 800-meter runs, right? So it's like they're progressing in intensity, they're progressing with pace, and they're very specific, right? So I'm getting a very specific outcome from these workouts at the pace. I'm fatiguing my legs with an 8K run, which is about like 4-5 miles, somewhere around there. I think a little bit closer to 4. And then I'm running at a high pace, almost like my race pace, high intensity at that pace to build up that like endurance at that pace, right? And it's helped me a ton. So once you figure out these specifics and it's like, hey, I can start to figure this out. And running's very different because it's a very more of a mental, I mean, it's a physical sport, but like a mental sport because you're kind of on your own out there. But the thing I want you to kind of take away from this is like just to kind of look at some real programming is as you progress out, you have these specific details, like you're getting specific outcomes, right? And the way you structure the workouts in season are going to look a lot different than if I was to just say, hey, I'm going to go run 8K at like a moderate intensity. And when I finish, I finish. It's just really about finishing the miles, right? Here, it's like I need to be at or below a pace for the entire time, right? And I want to finish at a certain time so I can get a specific outcome at the end. So, those are the biggest differences that I see. And I think that, like, again, for somebody who is an athlete, someone who's looking to improve their performance right now, the biggest thing you want to see is if I'm going to improve, off season's going to be baseline improvement, in season's going to be we just built that baseline up to here, now we're going to build that ceiling, and then we kind of fill that in through the season to keep that thing moving. So,
That's good.
Anything to add to that?
No, that was a really good recap on it.
Cool. So I think just even getting into I guess I kind of already said this, but like my hot take for the day was that fight sports is the single hardest sport to manage for S&C. But I guess I'll add the second part to it. So like fight sports is, in my opinion, the hardest thing to manage inside of S&C. And it's got the single worst structure for S&C behind it, right? Because fight sports are very archaic in the way the sport is run. It's why the fighters are still getting paid really shit to fight. They get paid nothing. You have to kind of like fight you have to have like 10 fights before you're even making enough to like, you know, pay your coaches and support yourself. And it's like you're supposed to be a professional athlete, right? Like there's not really a lot of professional, like true professional sports out there at the level that the UFC's at, right? Where, you know, an athlete's coming in and making 10,000 to fight and 10,000 to show, right? Or to win. So it's just like it's crazy, and then that's why the sport is kind of lagging behind. The UFCPI is doing a great thing. People like myself who are coming into the field and showing real structure to S&C. You know, people like Phil, people like Corey Peacock, people like Jose. You know, these are just some people I've worked with in the past that are like great minds. There are some people like Tony Ricci and a couple of those guys who are doing like great research behind fight sports, and they put a lot of time and effort into studying the sport. But really, at the end of the day, there is no structure. There is, unless you're in the UFC, there is no structure. There is no place that you go to where it's like in these team sports that, you know, they might not be like the best hires, they might not be the best people, but a lot of these guys are, you know, their dreams and their goals are to get to these professional sports. So there's a lot of high level and highly qualified people to be in there, and there's a lot of structure, there's a lot of foundation, there's a lot of these things that fight sports just doesn't have. And in my experience, you know, it's why I had so many quick opportunities with so many great people, was because I had structure and background that you don't see in S&C and MMA. And it's not to say that I'm like, I think my level is obviously what got me in front of these people at such a rapid rate, because it takes time, you know, like even if you make it to a professional sport, you're not stepping in with, you know, the best players on the team. It's like you're working with the bench warmers first, and then you're working your way up and building those relationships. And then maybe in a couple years, if you're still there, they'll give you a chance to work with the best players on the team, right? It takes a lot of time because you need to build those reps and get those things in, where in fight sports, it's like there is no structure behind it. There is no quote unquote team, right? Unless you're built into a team like I have been multiple times. And it's just a lot different of a sport to kind of manage, because you are managing 5 different sports. You are managing fighting on top of, like, again, you're fighting for training. You're grappling very hard for jiu-jitsu. Again, you're grappling for wrestling. Then you're striking. Then you're doing kickboxing. Then you're doing regular boxing. It's like all of these different things. And then you have to manage a workout on top of that throughout the week. So it's a lot of 2-a-days. It's a lot of really hard 8-week runs. And then you kind of like pull back super hard for a month or two. And then you do it again. And then you pull back. And that's why these fighters' careers are really so short, is because you often see them go from like 0 to 100 so quick. And one of my things that I really enjoyed doing, and something I took away from someone I'm going to mention at the end of the podcast, is like you want to stay ready. You have to stay ready if you're going to be consistent in fighting. And like if you stop moving for too long, it's going to set you back, because you have to go 0 to 100 so quick. And that's when these injuries happen, these massive weight fluctuations. And then you wonder why these guys, you know, struggle or get knocked out, and then their careers just go right after, you know? But yeah, I guess that's my hot take.
My hot take is, well, one, that's I agree with that hot take. It's not only difficult because there's less structure, but it's also difficult because the rate of injury is the risk of injury is much higher in a sport like fighting.
You're literally getting hit with a baseball bat.
Yeah, nonstop.
Boom, or you're getting kicked in the leg. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot that can go wrong, which makes it a little bit harder on the strength and conditioning coach.
Football, you have football, like time off a little bit, but
yeah, that's the one thing about football where I'd say like I agree, because even those dudes, they're freaking like there's no weight classes in football really. You could put on size, but if you're a smaller guy and a lineman fucking takes you out, you're getting hit by a freaking Prius out there. So like. But again,
I guess I just want to add one thing, like, because I know a lot of people would probably say, like, "Oh, football is the heart," whatever. Like the thing with these team sports, it's like, you know when the season starts and you know when the season ends, right? And for the most part, if you're like a Jets fan, for example, it's never going past fucking January anyway, or whenever.
Yeah.
You know, but those types of things are like, there's a structure to it. It's like my season starts on the first week of September, and it ends on, you know, the last week of January or something like that. So, you know, those types of things are very specific. Whereas like fighting, you know, I've had camps where people fight and then they fight like the weekend after. Yeah. And it's like, well, what the fuck? You know, or it's like no, I just fought. I'm taking time off for the next month. And then it's like a week into that time off, they're like, oh, I just got to fight. I'm fighting in 3 weeks. It's like, well, okay. So I guess we don't have a camp off camp. And it's like, now we're going from here to here to here back in like a week. And you have to manage it because there is no season. It's just when I want to fight, when the opportunities come, however quick they come along. Once you get to the top, things slow down a lot and you can have that consistency where it's like, you get that kind of like that Floyd effect.
Pick your fights a little more.
Yeah. Well, it's like I want to fight in September and then I want to fight in the summer when I make the most, like whatever it is, the biggest cards, that sort of deal. But until then, early on, it's like you got to take opportunities. You got to be ready at all times. You can't say no to a fight because if you say no, someone else is going to say yes and they're going to win and they're going to get to the next step before. It's a crazy sport. So it's very hard to manage. And go ahead.
No, that's what I was going to say is like the fact that you can get hit by somebody like 2-3 times your size in football. That part sucks, but you do know when the season begins and ends. So the clarity of the season and having this like plan does help for football. Obviously, it's still a very tough one to do, but fighting, I would agree, it's probably the hardest one, especially for strength and conditioning. But 100%. My hot take isn't really a hot take for coaches; it's more for parents. Get the youth in strength and conditioning. Your son or daughter.
Get the youth on steroids. Is that what you said?
Get the youth a needle. Okay, let's all share some needles with the youth.
I'm just kidding.
Sharing,
I'm just kidding, kind of.
He's not. He's serious. He wrote a letter to the president of the United States. No, don't share needles. Don't use needles. Kids, be safe. But somebody's gonna cut that out and be like, use needles, use them, share them, throw them at your neighbors.
Put them in the Halloween candy.
Yeah, put razor blades in there. Sorry, I had caffeine earlier today. It's still kicking. I'm getting hot and sweaty. But my hot take is parents would see and their athletes would benefit more from more strength and conditioning work in the off season than extra camp sport specific work. The amount of parents who are just like, well, Timmy's baseball season's done. We need to make sure he's working with the proper batting coach, proper pitching coach, and all this stuff in the off season, which it's important. Don't get me wrong. Like getting that extra work is important. But if you're hammering all these sport specific drills just to go back into the in season, what injuries did you work on? What strength did you gain? How are you becoming more resilient? If anything, that repetition on those joints, especially for baseball with throwing, for runners with their ankles and knees, for what's the other one I was going to mention? I think it was mainly baseball for the elbow and the shoulder, but the thought that you would get more out of doing the thing that is causing issues in the off season or causing issues in the in season and doing that in the off season versus throwing in more strength and conditioning in the off season is insane to me. Parents, get your youth strong in the off season, get them with a strength and conditioning coach. They're going to be okay for the few months that they're not throwing or hitting or doing whatever. They could still practice here and there. Focus on the things they're not getting in their sport in the off season as much as you can.
I want to, because this is
I
a
had some
conversation
gibberish in the middle there, so I apologize for that.
You're good. I've had some conversation or thoughts about this because I've seen this conversation so many times. There's the conversation that kids who specialize too early in their sport do damage to their body, right? Or they don't. I guess they say it's damaging to an athlete who specializes too early into a sport. Now, I understand, I get it. The only reason, and this is something I've gone back and forth with on my own because yes, I do think the general idea of playing other sports is great, but specializing and becoming the best in the world at what you do takes time, right? And in any other aspect, specializing is that's all you do, right? In my mind, a great strength conditioning program is what youth are lacking and is where that general aspect comes into play where someone can specialize early on in a sport that they're not going to suffer the same detriment, the detriment to their body. Right?
I agree.
And this is something I've been trying to talk a little bit more about because people just assume it's if you're a kid, you have to go play other sports because it helps you in your main one. That's fine if that's how you feel. But I truly believe if you want to be the best, right? If you want to be Kobe, if you want to be LeBron, if you want to be Jordan, again, I don't think, especially in today's world, I don't think there's time to, I don't want to say there's not time to play other sports, but it's like you can counteract that with a really great S&C program from a really young age, right? Because if you find something that covers all those, like essentially like playing the other sports is just kind of like throwing a blanket and being like, I'm just going to cover everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you're going to touch all those qualities, which is great. But if you find a really high level S&C coach who can teach you movement, knows the in camp off camp type of model, really has their structure down, their identity as a coach, I truly believe you can specialize early on in the sport and be totally cool with it. And I really think that you can benefit. And there's going to be, this might be a little bit of a better hot take, but I do think this is a conversation that maybe can be for a different episode. But I really believe that argument is flawed because the lack of respect around like real strength conditioning. And if people really respected strength conditioning, we wouldn't be having the conversation of like kids shouldn't specialize because it's damaging. Because outside of physical stuff, how is practicing one thing for your life and getting as good as you can at it like damaging? Outside of like FOMO and like the physical repetition of like, hey, I'm a basketball player, I'm continuously jumping and I'm never going full sprints, or I'm never rotating enough, or I'm not, like, whatever it is. It's like if you can cover all that in a real S&C program, then what's the problem?
All movement patterns and just training in all planes of movement is going to give just as good of an effect as playing other sports.
I just
and
think,
I believe
like,
that.
to me,
Yeah.
Maybe
If you're hitting all the big rocks in your training in the off season, you don't need to be worrying about doing other sports. You're still doing lateral movement. You're still going backwards, forwards. You're still training on different planes of motion with weight. You're getting what you need out of it. Absolutely, I agree. I think like where it becomes damaging with specialization is, like you said, it's the lack of that good strength and conditioning. Because if you're throwing a ball all the time, nonstop, like, yeah, it's gonna start to chip away at you. But if you're doing stuff to be more resilient in the shoulder, a little more resilient in the elbow and the joints, then you're probably going to have a little more control over it, especially with deceleration training stuff.
I've just always had a hard time believing that taking time away from what you love and taking time away from doing what you love is going to get you better at doing what you love. Like, I understand to a certain degree, like, you need time off, and I understand it's not always the best to do it 24/7, but to blindly assume, and I think this argument is only relevant because the lack of respect around S&C. I think if S&C was properly implemented into high schools and middle schools, like, there would be no conversation of like, you can't specialize. It's just like, hey, because it's a health issue, really, it comes down to. And like, if people really invested inside of the S&C for sports from a really young age, this wouldn't be a conversation, wouldn't be an issue, and kids would be able to do, whatever they wanted to do, really. If they wanted to specialize in just basketball, baseball, soccer, whatever it is, they'd be able to do that at a really high level and not have to worry about it.
Yeah, dude. I think a whole episode could be on that because there's so many points that we can make based on.
Yeah, maybe we'll make that
hot take
episode
alone.
here, because I definitely have a lot more to say on that subject.
Same.
We'll dive into that. So I think the last two things, the drill, next segment. I want you guys to kind of like go home or get off listening to this.
Or stay home.
Yeah, stay home. Stay home. And define what the differences are for you between in-camp and off-camp programming, right? Is it the language you use? Is it the programming? How do you actually define that as a coach? So when someone comes in, you know where you're at with it, right? Like, how are you able to hand someone a program, and what differentiates that for you? I know what my programs look like off-camp versus in-camp, or in-season versus off-season. What do yours look like in that phase of training, right? How do you define it? How do you split it up? How does it look on paper? Because I think that's really important. Anything for you?
Just to build on that, like, after you're making your programs and let's say you've built out like an in-season program and an off-season program, and you're doing the compare and contrast thing, ask yourself how well it fits for all sports. Because that's another thing. Like 90%, like we said, 90% of the program in the off season should pretty much be the same. And see if you could find like little areas that could use improvement. Like if it's becoming like extremely sport specific toward one sport, and you're training multiple sports under the same program or whatever it might be. Just look at the program you've built and make sure that it is hitting like all planes of motion, different movement patterns, single leg, single arm, double arm, all that stuff. And just obviously don't lose your programming identity with the changes you make, but notice that there's going to be some differences from the in-season to off-season.
Yeah, 100%. And then the last thing, the influence pick, I really, really learned a lot in regards to in-season programming or concepts, I should say, from Corey Schlesinger, who is currently the S&C coach for the Detroit Pistons. He's been around a couple places. He was at Stanford, then he went to the Phoenix Suns, then he went to Texas, then he went to Detroit now. He kind of coined a term, might have been a thing, but he kind of like put a name to it, microdosing fitness. And there's a lot that I've learned from that concept that I actually implemented with a lot of the fighters that I worked with specifically in season, but then also kind of like, how to approach some of this stuff a little bit more, because I really like some of the things he talks about. I like the concepts he has. I like the thoughts he has around it. And I think he's someone who, like me, I take a lot of what I do from a lot of different areas. Like I think that in fight sports, for example, shot put is a really great S&C area to kind of look at, because it's not the same thing obviously, but there's very similar tactics that you're looking for in shot put, where you're generating a lot of power through the hips to create some, extension that looks like a punch, right? So it's like there's aspects of that you can take. There's aspects of track and field that in fight sports that you can take. There's aspects of, like training for basketball, like that, those sorts of things. Like there's so much you can learn just from diving into other sports and learning and going to do them yourself, and really kind of taking away the feelings that you get from playing basketball. Because, for me right now, like there's no, like playing basketball is one of those things where it's like, if you get really good games going for a couple hours, there's a fatigue you get from playing basketball that is unlike any sport, right? It's like from the fast twitching, the change of direction, the jumping, the, you're guarding, you're shooting. Like there's so many different areas and ranges of motion that you're going through. Like after a good game of basketball, you're fatigued, right? There's a different fatigue from football. There's a different fatigue from baseball. There's a different fatigue from soccer, hockey, all that stuff. And it all really comes down to like managing that in-season and off-season programming. And I think he does a really good job, Corey Schlesinger, on breaking down what it is. And if you have any questions, obviously I can break it down for you as well, because I learned it from him. But yeah, it's a really cool concept of like microdosing it and kind of like making it fit into the season. But yeah, I think those are like, so any of his podcasts, if you just look it up, he doesn't have a podcast himself, but he's been on a couple recently, more recently in the last couple of years. And yeah, I think that's it for me.
I actually don't have an influence pick this time.
I think just go and listen to him.
Yeah, I think that's a good one, because he has a lot of information too. Like you can learn a lot from him.
Yeah, and listen to us.
Obviously.
I appreciate you guys for tuning in this far. If you guys have any questions, if you want to talk more about in-season and off-season programming, or, any of the things that go along with that, whether it's learning a little bit more about it, having some like hot takes that you want to discuss with us about it, just reach out to us on Instagram, reach out to us on, whatever, platform you have. Definitely take some time and dive into that a little bit more. And if you haven't, reach out on www.bgperform.com/training to work with Jerry or myself, as well as download the free ebook, the goals ebook, like why goals matter, www.bgperform.com/goals. And the last thing is I'm going to put the yearly coaching audit at the bottom of the YouTube. So if you haven't done that yet, download that, go over the questions, look through that. I really think it's that time of the year where you need to start preparing for 2026, because before you know it, the last 2 weeks are here of December. It's Christmas. You're traveling, doing all this stuff, and it's really important that you prep everything before that time comes, so you can enjoy it, slow down, and then get ready to crush the new year. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time.